While we might all be a little tired of hearing about the unprecedented nature of the coronavirus crisis, it is unprecedented in the mainstream attention it's brought to the sustainability of supermarket supply chains and the health and well-being of those within them. At Oxfam, we've been working on these issues for some time through our Behind the Barcodes campaign and our scorecard, which evaluates the policies and practice of supermarkets on 4 different areas: transparency and accountability, commitment to workers' rights, to smallholder farmers, and to women's rights. Overall on our scorecard, over the 3 years we've been doing it, companies have steadily improved, but there's a lot of work to be done, especially as coronavirus exacerbates the existing inequalities we know to be existing within these crucial supply chains. Overall, the UK companies have done comparably well on our scorecard, especially compared to their international counterparts. And while this is slightly disappointing, and looking at the macro, it's also positive in the sense that the UK companies' progress shows that it is possible to make real change in these big businesses, which supports the people on the ground. The best progress from all of these companies has been in workers' rights and on transparency and accountability measures. In the UK, only Asda has not committed to the proactive prevention of forced labour in their supply chains, and only Aldi cannot show it is taking steps to ensure its supply chain standards are implemented beyond first-tier suppliers. We've also welcomed Morrisons and Lidl kicking off the movement towards supply chain transparency in the UK, meaning disclosing who supermarkets are sourcing their products from. We particularly welcome the commitment by Tesco to offer positive incentives to suppliers who show they are improving labour standards, something which sounds really simple, but is a crucial step to changing company buying practices, which we know can be a driver of poor human rights compliance by suppliers. However, there's still a lot of room to move on this issue, with only Tesco and Sainsbury's committing to removing unfair trading practices like last-minute order cancellations from their business. During the coronavirus pandemic, it was these type of unfair trading practices which wreaked particular havoc for the people working on those cancelled orders, particularly in developing countries. Large supermarkets can commit to changing these practices and to practicing a more sustainable type of business, and we welcome them taking this step. Supermarkets have also been slow to act to address the issues which specifically affect women. Last year, the average UK company score on our scorecard for women was just 7%. That's thankfully now improved to an average of 27% overall, with Lidl, Tesco, Morrisons and Sainsbury's all committing to track the gender breakdown of men and women within their supply chains. But this is just a first step. We know that although men are at a greater risk from the coronavirus itself, it's women who are disproportionately bearing the economic brunt of the lockdown and the pandemic itself. Women do 3 times as much unpaid care work as men at the best of times, and this is only being increased during the coronavirus pandemic, meaning that it's women who are the first to be pushed out of the workforce, to have to reduce their hours when they pick up the slack of caring responsibilities. Increasing care workloads for women means losing the progress we've made on women's empowerment in politics, in business, and in education. Our scorecard focuses on evaluating the policies of these large companies. And while looking at policies might seem a little abstract from the lives of people on the ground, we know that they can have a direct effect. Having supply chain transparency, for example, not only allows consumers to know where their products are being sourced from, but it allows farmers and workers to know where the retail end of their product is, and to access grievance mechanisms that those buying companies might hold, or to raise complaints directly with the buyers themselves. Similarly, knowing the breakdown of men and women in your supply chains and knowing where women are located is the first step to actually taking action to address the inequalities which affect women. The progress of companies along our barcode therefore does represent some tangible steps towards making real change, and we encourage more companies to continue working along this scale to improve the standard of living for the men and women who produce our food. We know companies can take meaningful action. Now let's see more of them do it.